Well, thank you, Jeff. Again, my name is Dana Reed. I was just talking to Bobby. He said it must be nice to be the guy that gets to go in and sell the sizzle. And I've never thought of myself as the guy holding the fajitas before. But if that's the vision you guys all get of me, that's fine with me. What I want to do today is talk about SailPoint Predictive Identity, really about where our company is headed and the way in which we see the identity and access governance space evolving. And where I want to start with really it's where we've been, because I think it's important. You know, we all know the analogy of Abbott and Costello and the whole who's on first analogy. And I think it's a very, very good one to talk about identity and access governance. When we first started the IAG world, we really worried about who had access to what, right? And we had the first two position players of the defense. And these are your AD groups and your LDAP groups and your SAP groups, et cetera. This is about building users and then dissecting them and understanding what access they have and should they still have that type of structured access. We then moved into what's called the unstructured data world, where we added more parts of the defense, that where is the what and how is the what being used. These are your file shares, right? This is all about, it's all about detection, understanding where your files are. It's about classification, understanding where the problem points may be, understanding in your files which one of these files is actually the valuable ones that we should be concerned about. We then worried about monitoring and governance of those files. We worried about who's reading our files. We worried about who's writing our files. We worried about who's copying them, and then who's taking them and moving them out of what is typically private reading rooms and moving them over to public reading rooms where they're much more visible to people and much more able to be compromised and taken advantage of. Where we're maturing now is we're adding a final player to the defense, to the game, and that's why. And what we're starting to do is we're starting to use AI and machine learning technologies to understand and look at our identities and put a magnifying glass on them and understanding, why do they need this access? What's going on? Do they still need it? What don't they have that they need, et cetera? And so we currently operate in this world that I like to call the assisted identity world. This is the world where you log into our products and you ask our products for answers. And our products will then go out and give you those answers. You ask for a report, or you ask it to go provision someone, or you ask for a request, but you're still initiating that request. Where we're moving to in the long game is planting a flag in this world called autonomous identity. And the autonomous identity world is a world in which our products think for themselves. They grant people access, and they remove that access all based off decisions that they've made based off of the learning that they've done. But the world in which we're entering right now is this world that I like to call augmented identity. And this is the world in which our products start to develop brains. And they're developing brains, especially right now, in areas around peer group analysis and access modeling. Why do people have access? Does it make sense for them to have access? Do they still need access, et cetera? And so what we've done is we've branded this world, the world of what we call predictive identity. And so when you look at SailPoint, our slogan has always been SailPoint Technologies, identity is power. So if identity is power, predictive identity is identity at the power of why. Or for the marketing folks, we put the Y in identity. You can't spell identity without Y. You can pick whatever slogan you want to pick. But at the core of predictive identity is a new product that we've released recently called Identity AI. And it's where we go out and we look at all of the data points that we've provided within our ecosystem. Access requests, approvals, rejections, revocations of access certifications, what entitlement DNA, so what security permissions you have, what identity attributes that you have, maybe that you share with your other individuals. And we bleed out efficiencies and insights that we had the data for, but we never had the ability and the technology to start to bleed out and to start to take action upon. And so we're delivering it from the cloud. The idea of the version goes away. You never look at a baby and you go, that's a really cute baby. What version is that baby, right? The baby just grows up. It learns to tie its shoes and it learns to play tennis and speak multiple languages. And it starts out at a decent level and it gets better and better and better over time. And that's what's going to happen with identity AI. And you'll even see this as I go through some of the demonstration. We are continuously evolving this product and delivering as we work through this world of augmented identity towards the autonomous identity world. This will be the new cornerstone of how our platform products work, what they call out to. This is going to be the new brain that we're creating. So this is our bet. And we're right. And the reason that we're right is because the market demands it. And I know we've talked about zero trust over and over again, so I'll go quickly through these slides. But in 2010, this guy, his name is John Kindervig, and this is his real Twitter profile, believe it or not. But he was an analyst at Forrester, and when people talk about how words matter, all the guy did was write a paper. And he wrote a paper that said, trust in the digital world serves no purpose. And the only thing that can happen if you trust in a digital system is it will be exploited, and the only outcome will be betrayal. My initial thought was, man, this sounds like the worst first date conversation ever. But he also, to me, just is somewhat of a glass half empty kind of guy. But unfortunately, we need to live in a world in which we are half empty type of people. And so he invented this thing called the zero trust model. And Google looked at that paper and said, I'll take your zero trust model and I'll raise you one, we'll implement it. And so if you have not read their Beyond Corp docs, they're very quick reads, there's about 6 or 7 of them. It's very, very interesting, because it's not only about implementing the technology, it's also about the human component around what zero trust means and how you can actually move yourself iteratively into that model. But the model really means this. It means that trust but verify is no longer acceptable. And it means that instead we need to trust nothing and now verify everything and only deliver applications and data to authenticated and authorized devices. So zero trust is about better authentication, it's about better authorization, it's about better approval. It's about better insight, it's about better visibility, and it's about better control. It's about, are you who you say you are? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And do you have what you're supposed to have? And unfortunately, it's about doing it at scale. Because we are now governing more users, we're governing more applications, and we're governing more data than we ever have before. The problem is that our organizations are open for business. And they're continuously open for business. And disruption of continuity of business is not an option for us. And so we're doing all of this while still building and collecting data by 2025 of 463 billion gigabytes a day, 80% of which is not inside your firewall. And not only is your data not inside your firewall, your users and your applications, they're not inside your firewall now either. And so we need to do all of this, and yet still, when our clients, our customers, and by customers, I mean our vendors, our partners, our contractors, our employees, our buyers, our taxpayers, we need to give them the right access to the right stuff at the right time. And so it's kind of funny, because a guy named Dan Hitchcock from Microsoft back in 2005, he got it right. The idea that control of the host and control of the network in the information world, the evolution of it, data, controlling data now becomes more important. So that firewall that we used to rely on is now just another antiquated relic of the past. So as we talked about earlier, digital identities are now the new attack vector, right? And managing them correctly is the new center of security. Why do you rob a bank? You rob it because that's where the money is. Why do you control your money? Because you don't want to lose it, you don't want to spend it unwisely, and you don't want to have it be spent in counterproductive ways or stolen from you. So we need to start treating access and data in the same way. Because we walk a tightrope with our clients, our customers, our employees. Our employees and customers don't give us their data in their minds. We loan it to them. And so we need to be good stewards of data in a way in which we take your data and make life better for someone. When I was a kid, I had a TV guide. And I now have a guide on my TV, right? That's the goal of digital transformation. I go to Starbucks not for the coffee, I go there for the Wi-Fi, and they figure that out. And so we need to be better stewards of our data because that's the relationship that we're building with our folks. The problem is if we do it wrong, we get in trouble. And we get on the news and people start to not trust us. And in this digital world, they move along. And so I like this analogy. It's like giving your keys to your buddy who wants to borrow your car. And then all of a sudden you see your car for rent. It doesn't give you too good of a feeling now, does it? Right? Because you thought he was supposed to be a good steward of your property. So obviously this matters more now than it ever did before. And it matters because it's just like human health, right? You can't have a good human health without diet and exercise. And you can't have effective data and access controls without effective identity controls. Because if you don't have identity controls around data, all I need to do is become you. And that's how every hack has ever happened in the history of the world. Right? Someone just became someone else, got their credentials, and utilized what they were able to do. So I'm stealing this from Darren. We were in a meeting the other day, and he said this, and I just kind of stopped. I thought, you got it right. It's simple. It's about better garbage collection. Right? It's about understanding what people don't need anymore and getting rid of it. It's also about providing receipts. Everything over 25 bucks I need to provide a receipt for. And when it comes to IAG, I need to provide receipts for getting rid of access for folks. And so the first way in which identity AI is going to help you is we're going to help you provide receipts. In what's called access history, when your auditors come to you and say, hey, here's 10 identity events that happened to these folks, I need you to tell me what happened and the governance around those. We can now do that. We're going to give you a nice calendar-based widget here where you can look at users as they've changed. They go on top, and you can see what was added and removed to a user over time. At the bottom here, you can actually see now the catalyst of why that occurred, a job change. Now, because we're delivering at the speed of SaaS, what's not in this picture is additional adornment of what we call governance events. The how did it happen and the why. It happened because of an access request to get the access. It was removed because when that job transfer occurred, we initiated a job transfer certification and we removed your additional over-entitled access because you no longer needed it. All of your answers are now here. I can now look and compare access over time, and I can see that in the past year, Sarah Landon has actually changed. She's lost 2 roles. Remember, her job changed. She moved from a database administrator in IT to a financial planning consultant. She lost her IT access, and she now gained her Salesforce access. And of course, we even deleted her accounts at some point in time and gained her new accounts. Now, what we're also going to do here is we're going to give you better insight. And we're going to help you solve what I've deemed what I call the role flaw. The role flaw is very simple. Role definition has always been a static solution to a dynamic problem. Because we would take a point in time and say, what does this person need to effectively do his or her job? The problem is tomorrow, a new application comes on board and what he or she needs actually changes. So this was an expansive and expensive project to undertake. And the problem was, just like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, once it got done, we had to go right back to the beginning and start all over again. So role modeling, not only was it not effective, but it was not a sunk cost, it was actually a recurring cost. And it has a lot of implications as we push down the road, especially now with successful digital transformation, zero trust, et cetera. The way we got around the role flaw was that what I actually needed to do my job, I gave you a little bit more. I looked at what people had, took a top-down approach, and I thought, all right, well, if all these people have this stuff, I guess that's acceptable access that you need to do your job. The problem is that appropriate access is simply just acceptable. It's agreed upon. Doesn't mean it's right. What is right is what's adequate to do your job. We gave people just-in-case access instead of just-in-time access. And so the solution to the role problem using AI and ML is to continuously now test the hypothesis, solve a dynamic problem with a dynamic solution. And when you look at a role, you really need to answer 3 questions, and we can do this now essentially on a daily basis. 1, what do I have that I use on a daily basis? 2, what do I not have that I now need? I'm 40. Third, what do I have that I don't use? The proverbial treadmill in the basement, or for the people that are younger than me, your soon-to-be Peloton in the basement. All right? And so the first way in which we're going to give you better insight to solve this problem is through this thing called Explore. And these are shareable key performance indicator dashboards that you can push out to your organization, out to your folks, your level of scope, your level of control. What are my people requesting? Here, look at my top 10 certifiers. Who are they? Who are the problem children here? Who are the ones that are approving everything, are bulk approving and not revoking anything? I can now identify that. Who's taking too long to perform their access certifications? At a macro scope, C-level, microscope, manager level, I can see exactly who the people are that are problem points in my IGA program. What are my people requesting? It's pretty interesting on the role problem, isn't it? When you can have a pretty good idea of what a bad role definition is by what departments are requesting the most stuff. Because they're the ones that don't have what they need to do their jobs effectively. That's probably a pretty good place to start when you're looking at reevaluating roles. Average request times by location. Everyone loves to complain. So they're going to call you and they're going to say, man, this new system you implemented, it takes forever to get access. And then you go, you work in Redmond by chance? Because your manager is taking too long. This is a person problem. This is not a technology problem. And again, we can look at this now at a location, a department, an individual person. We can figure out why people are complaining, who's taking too much time, et cetera. We can also now look at what people are requesting at a macro level. This is pretty interesting. It's hard to see, but the top 5 requests up there are all Office 365, and one of them is an application called Trek. It's time reporting. This company makes you request time reporting, and everybody gets it. So we're bothering managers, we're bothering application owners, we're instigating workflows 3,000 times. Why? For something people should have gotten in the first place. We can now better identify that, and we can help you bring that into the role so people get part of the role definition is what do I have on a daily basis that I need, or what do I not have that I need to get. We're also going to even give you some pretty cool, insightful graphs. If I want to see where my employees and workers are in the United States or in the world, there's probably no better insightful graph than a world graph or a graph of the United States. If you don't like the graph, go ahead and click on it, and we'll give you 30 or 40 more different types of graphs. The Tableau world of dashboards is here. We're no longer in the world of bar graphs and line graphs, et cetera. The user interface should be a catalyst for enhancing the insight of the data, and we can now finally do that. The next thing we're doing here is we're reinventing access modeling. And we're reinventing it, I think, in a pretty exciting way. Because when you look at access modeling and you look at AI and ML and how you apply it to a corporate or governmental structure, a corporation is no different than a standard social structure. Think of this like high school. And it's a bit harder for me at 42 now to actually think about high school, but those are the best days of my life. But my point here is the corporation is like a social structure. And so it shares 2 very common themes. The first is that it's what's called homophilic. Homophilic means that finance users typically go to meetings with finance users. And they talk about finance stuff. And the athletes in high school used to hang out with the athletes in high school. They go to lunch with the athletes in high school. And the kids that were in drama hung out with the kids that were in drama. And they had the same friends. They talked about drama things. What it also means is that the organizations have what's called a high modality. It means that people in finance have the same access typically as other people in finance, especially if you compare them with folks that are in the call center or the warehouse or a different governmental organization, et cetera. It's the same thing about high school where the kids that were into punk rock all shared the same characteristics of black jeans and wallet chains and Ramones t-shirts. They all looked the same, they acted the same, they talked about the same thing, right? So nothing here is new. This is what makes me feel like we're right. So what we'll do is we will take what I call your entitlement DNA. We can look at your access. And because we're in a homophilic, high modality environment, sharing the same access means that you probably share the same job function. So when we graph you on a database like this and we start to see clusters of users with like access, these are your benefits clerks and your HR representatives and the DoD area, et cetera, right? And we can also start to see people that cluster together and those that sit outside of those clusters. And those people we care about just as much because we call them outliers. And this is a real world example. I call this person the lady in red. The lady in red is Susan. And the issue with Susan is you can see she's an outlier, but she's an outlier because she joined the government in Project A as a contractor, moved to Project B, and then now works in some organization as an actual employee. The problem is, because of poor governance, we never got rid of Susan's access. And so not only does Susan not belong to her current peer group, she actually indirectly, and we can see this, belongs to multiple peer groups. So we call Susan a highly contagious individual. She probably wouldn't like that, but that's what we've labeled her. And we've labeled her a highly contagious individual because what happens is when you hire a net new Susan in her current job, someone is going to say, what access does Jason get? They go, I don't know, just give him what Susan has. And now what we've done is we've made a problem even worse. The problem is way over here, we've got someone and a team that's building top-down roles, and they're looking at that job title and they're going, well, both of those people have the same access, let's just build a role around it, right? And now we've made things even worse. So not only do we want to identify the Susans of the world, the outliers, we want to help you mitigate their access and get rid of what they no longer need. Again, I stole this a little bit from a colleague of mine, but it's about minimizing the blast radius. It's about getting rid of the things that could be used against them if their potential risk becomes kinetic risk. And so to me, I'm a Midwest guy, and the proof is in the pudding, right? And so this is actually one of our early access clients, and you can see this is one of our department. And over about, hopefully this is going to turn on, over about 13 certifications, you can see here that the users, we start to identify access that they no longer need. And you can start seeing that people start to cluster closer together, meaning they have similar access. And eventually, actually, a third peer group starts to develop. But what we're doing here with our product is we're allowing you to start to see, it's like it started over, but you saw the end of it. We're allowing you to start to cluster users better, identify peer groups better, and when that happens, we're minimizing the blast radius of any of those people that were to be compromised. Role modeling obviously becomes a whole lot more effective once this takes place. And we're able to do this with peer groups on a daily basis. So that brings me to what's called peer group analysis. It's a fresh look at what I call bottom-up role mining. It's bottom-up role mining almost on steroids. We've all seen that Excel spreadsheet, right, that had 2 or 3 applications of access and all of your users, and you tried to figure out what everybody had. After you got past 2 applications, you couldn't figure it out, right? Peer group analysis allows us to do this at the scale of 2,000 applications, hundreds of thousands of users. The machine now is the technology that we can leverage to actually make this work. And so we leverage a capability inside of AI called unsupervised learning. There's what's called supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. When you hear about like the chess thing and Go, that's all reinforcement learning. Unsupervised learning is kind of like, I call it like a lazy man's AI. We just give the system all of your people's access. And we only look at access. I don't care who they are. We're doing correlation before we do causation. And so what we do is we do this. If I want to take these Disney characters here, and I want to organize them by the highest modality, meaning the most similar characteristics, I'm going to look at first the characteristics they share in common. They all have big eyes and they all have big feet. They all must be ducks. We got it somewhat right. We got to a modality of, say, 60%. So the system does it again. And the system in real life does this millions of times on a day-to-day basis. And then we start to look at additional characteristics of the person. And eventually, we get it right to a modality that we agree upon. And so what we're doing here, after we have this together, is we're applying these algorithms called the Jacquard similarity algorithm and the Louvain method. Don't worry about what they are, just worry about what they do. What they do is they take you, and they compare you against everybody else in your organization. and they take the person next to you, and they compare you against everybody else in the organization. And they figure out, who is it that you look like? Who is the most similar person or persons based off of your access in your organization? And not only can they ask, what is the characteristics that Leo and Jack both share together, we can also now understand maybe what does Jack have that Leo doesn't. I would argue a good movie career, but that's another story. But so, I can fly. But so, if you ever wonder how Amazon.com works when it talks about things that people like you also bought these things, this is the technology that we're looking at. We can now apply this to things like access request to give you a very, very dynamic type of access request as we move forward with this long tail of progress through this augmented world of identity. And so within peer group analysis, inside of our tool, we can break your users into peer groups. So we'll take a look here at peer group number 6. Peer group number 6, we can see, has 311 people in it. They share a total of 92 common entitlements. And on the right-hand side, it's a bit hard to see, but these are the most common entitlements that they share. Now, obviously, the top one here is time reporting. Everybody has time reporting, so of course, everybody in my cluster has time reporting as well. Peer groups are also called cliques, by the way. If you remember in high school, you hung out in different cliques. It's pretty similar. So the idea here is that we can now see what all these users have in common. Now, the top ones that everybody shares, this may, in a hierarchical structure, this may be the everyone role or the all users role. I would contend in a peer group-based structure, hierarchy is only there for maintenance purposes, and so you may be able to get rid of a hierarchical role model if the roles are created on a daily basis. It's a whole nother discussion. On the left-hand side here is what is most representative of this group. 1 in 4 people in this organization share these accounting entitlements, but everyone in this peer group that the system just created has these accounting entitlements. I've got a pretty good idea of who they are. But I don't need to have a good idea. I just ask the system, because I've already pulled in your data. So I can figure out that these are your accountants. They operate out of these locations. They support our London activities. That's why you see that little area up at the top. Again, we do correlation, and then we do causation. When you're looking at a new role modeler, I've just figured out a common set of people, a common set of access, what makes that access unique, and what attributes users share to get that access. That's pretty much everything you need for a pretty kick-ass role modeler. And we're going to be delivering that in Q1 of next year. You can see here, this is kind of some futures around a peer group-based role modeler, which is pretty cool. I've got 2 minutes, so I'll make this pretty quick. But we also solve what's called the human component. This is the last thing that we want to solve. And I equate the human component to this picture that I made a couple of months ago. We all know the story of Mount Everest, right? And how we're making it so easy now to climb Mount Everest that people get in this area called the death zone. And you only have a certain amount of time to get up the mountain and down in the death zone before bad things start to happen to you. The problem is we're making it so easy to get up to that level that people are getting hurt and they're dying because the line's getting too long. We're making identity and access governance so easy to do, to pull on so many applications that people are running out of time. The time component for a prisoner is pretty interesting, right? They have too much time. So they make dangerous objects out of innocuous objects because they have too much time. Our employees have too little time. And so what they do is their efficiency is to bulk approve things, to bulk certify things. And what's happening is we're not getting the effectiveness out of what is still the preferred route of an identity and access governance strategy. And the reality is, in the smart money, and our biggest auditors are now recognizing that this isn't happening. So we need to figure out a way to govern better, to govern smarter, and to increase the efficiency of getting people into and out of our products. And we do that now by taking the peer group analysis and applying it to what's called the governance recommender. And so for those of you here that use our products, you know within access certification, you used to have to rely on the description to be able to understand what it is that users have. We're now going to take your peer groups and we're going to give you thumbs up and thumbs down analysis of that access. And we're going to tell you why we believe that a user should or should not have this access. This is inside of your peer group, people that report to your manager, your department, your cost center, whatever it is. typically have this access, yes, we recommend it. But there's also, one of these is not like the others. And if I had to look at descriptions, I'd have no idea that treasury analyst is the one that I should be concerned about. But now I know, right? Now I know what my outliers are because I'm in a homophilic high modality environment. If people that are like me don't have this access, odds are I probably don't need it. And so we're going to do this here in access certifications. We're going to do this here in approvals. And so I got 6 seconds, but my colleague Marty talked about this the other day, and I thought it was really interesting. And he said, my last question I want to leave you on is, why do cars have brakes? And I stopped and I thought, that's a dumb question. It slows you down. And everybody thinks that cars have brakes because they slow you down. The idea around AI and IAG investments, it isn't to slow the business down, to get rid of access people don't need. Because a car has brakes not to slow you down. A car has brakes because it speeds you up. If you had to go to the store with your friends and you said, let's go to the store, there's only one problem, my car doesn't have brakes. How fast would you actually be able to drive? You wouldn't be able to drive that fast. So making these investments in IAG and utilizing AI and ML technologies really takes that compliance component and it makes it a component that is not there to slow you down. It's there because it's there to speed you up. So that's all I have to say, and I guess I can open with any questions and we can go from here. Thank you.
What kind of mechanisms are you generating in order to protect the AI and the assets of any kind of company where you can see foreign entities that come in and steal company property?
Can you ask it again, please, if I can?
Okay, so again, the question is, as far as AI, there's obviously a lot of foreign countries that want corporate property. So what are the mechanisms that your company are using to try to prevent that?
I think the goal for AI is to better understand if users do not have I call it a need to know, a need to use, that we can then identify that and get rid of that. So if a foreign power or someone were to try to compromise any individual and utilize their capabilities, they should have adequate capabilities, not acceptable capabilities, and that would then keep them away. So I don't know if we're addressing that specifically, but I think the whole notion of least privilege, of moving users to get rid of what they don't need. When you look at a boulder on a hill, right, in physics terms, has high potential energy. And the minute that boulder starts to get pushed, it has high kinetic energy. So our goal is to look at users and understand the outliers that have high potential risk and mitigate them before they become high kinetic risk. So I hope that answers your question to a degree, but.
I mean, do you think that it's something that should be explored?
I think absolutely. And it's every time I give these talks, I get a couple of good things to bring back to our products team. I think it's a really interesting insight. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Dana.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, bud.